Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, you know, as I enter into this debate, it's unfortunate that once again, parliamentarians are seized with having to discuss a Liberal ethical failure. You know, I'd like to respond a little bit to some of the members opposite who seem to be so concerned that us in this House have to deal with these, the long pile, the long list, the big pile of ethical failures, when, in their words, we should be debating the things that matter to Canadians. You know, it's unfortunate that these Liberals seem so concerned about their own political aims that they would do something like prorogue Parliament when we could have been debating the very issues that they say are so important. We could have been debating them weeks ago. We offered, as the Conservatives, to come in on Sunday to debate the very legislation that they are saying that we need to spend more time on. Well, we offered that and they said no. So, Madam Speaker, I find it tragic. But this is typical in true Liberal fashion. They will be so quick to say that there's an emergency, that we need to be a part of a Team Canada approach, whatever the case is, when really they have no interest in listening to anyone other than those narrow perspectives that they decide are important. And it's unfortunate that in the process, over the past 8 months, so often this House and the perspectives of many in it have been silenced. If they were interested in the Team Canada approach, I truly believe that we could have looked at many of the programs that have helped Canadians and they would have been made better. In fact, we see something like the emergency wage subsidy. The Liberals started at a 10% subsidy, which after significant pressure, I know from members of my party, the Conservative Party, and many Canadians and business groups, it was raised to 75%. That's called a Team Canada approach. So I'm glad that there are instances of that, but we could have been doing so much more had they not sidelined Parliament. You look at the prorogation, unprecedented, using a legitimate parliamentary tool to shut down the investigations into the Prime Minister and his senior cohort's actions. Unprecedented that a Prime Minister would abuse executive authority in a manner so flagrant as that. Unbelievable. So one of my colleagues across the way used the word disappointment. Now, in his context, he said he's disappointed that we're debating Liberal ethical failures, and I'm sure he is. He'd rather be talking about anything else, I'm sure. But I'll tell you what I hear each and every day from my constituents. Disappointment in this Liberal government. Disappointment in the laundry list of ethical failures. Disappointment in the fact that there is a Prime Minister across the way that is saying that the idea of a national unity crisis is crazy, unbelievable, and a true shame for the honor that needs to be represented in this House from coast to coast to coast. You see, Madam Speaker, I find it tragic that we have a government that is so embroiled in their own scandal, so embroiled in their own political aims, that they would refuse to acknowledge, and it's not for lack of trying, I know, from every Western MP, and not just Conservative Western MPs, although we do make up the vast majority of them. Western MPs have been making it clear that there's a unity crisis. Yet that government refuses to acknowledge that it even exists. For shame, Madam Speaker. So we have before us today another Liberal ethical failure. Former Member of Parliament breaching the ethics code 10 times. 10 times. A code that was put in place to ensure that members of this place had a framework that they could ensure that their ethical conduct fit within the expectations of what Canadians believe. And one of my fellow Conservative colleagues was reflecting upon his many years in this place and said back when it was first introduced, the idea of naming and shaming was enough. It was enough, Madam Speaker. that members of this place were concerned about how they conducted themselves. We're concerned about the fact that they wanted to do what was best for Canadians. Yet, when we look at the conduct of this government over the last close to 5 years, we see time and time again from the top, let alone the conduct of many others, how the absolute disregard that they show towards ethics, towards the conduct that Canadians expect us to uphold. There's disappointment, Madam Speaker, real disappointment in the actions of a Liberal government that is so consumed by their own scandals, their waste and mismanagement, that it is truly distracting from their ability to do the things that Canadians expect them to do. Now, we are going to continue to debate the other important items that are before this House, and that's important. But if we do not ensure that the trust and integrity of this institution is upheld, Madam Speaker, we are in an incredibly difficult place. Because when the trust of this institution is eroded, we see significant challenges come. We see that there's a lack of trust in anything that government says, not just its political leaders, but anything that they say. When Canadians can't trust their Prime Minister when he has truly misrepresented himself in this place, and it's been found to be the case, whether regarding his Aga Khan vacation, whether the SNC Lavalin scandal, or whether the, Madam Speaker, I sat on the Ethics Committee this summer, and I'll tell you, it was unbelievable. Every day there was a new development about how this government's just unbelievable conduct, an absolute embarrassment to the institutions and the places that each one of us, all 338 of us, the seats that we are temporary custodians of. It is unbelievable, the erosion of trust that has been taking place. So it's important that we debate issues like this, for we have to ensure that there is a full accounting, that when somebody makes a mistake, that there is an accounting of that. And the motion that my colleague from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes has brought forward is a step to ensure that there is an accounting, that there is responsibility taken, because Canadians demand nothing less. There is a need to ensure that there is responsibility taken for the actions of this government. You see, Canadians can't trust the words of this government, and it is causing a breakdown of the trust that our society, it's truly, Madam Speaker, a societal issue, that when you cannot trust the words of your leaders, it causes a societal breakdown that is concerning beyond all belief. We need to take this issue very seriously, just like we all need to take ethics and our conduct very, very seriously. We need to work diligently to ensure that trust is brought back to the institutions of Parliament, that we demonstrate that this place matters. There is one place in this country where every square kilometer of this beautiful nation is represented, and that is on the green carpet within the walls of this chamber. We need to demonstrate to Canadians that we are all worthy of that. Now, Madam Speaker, as I see my time is close to an end, I had a conversation with constituents the other day, and I asked them to give me a report about how things are out in their communities, and I represent a large rural riding with many communities. And I asked them to give me a brief report about how things are going and how they feel government is. And time again, as I listened on this Zoom call to person after person, there was about 20 of them, the words that I heard most were that they're tired of the scandal, the waste, and the mismanagement of this government, and that they are looking forward to a day when there is something called good governance brought back to this country, governance that Canadians can trust. So, Madam Speaker, I am proud to support this motion brought forward from my colleague and look forward to answering questions in that regard so that we can bring trust back to the hallowed halls of this Parliament. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Fleetwood Kills.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. That's a very good harumphing across the way there from the new member. Very well done. I'm wondering, given that, we burned up this much time, instead of talking about the things that are truly right there in front of Canadians as important to them, if he would be willing to then expand upon his colleague's motion and deal with a very long list that I could go into great lengths of time to describe to him, as compiled by the Tyee 5 years ago. It was entitled Harper, Serial Abuser of Power, and 70 occasions in which that Conservative crew offended democracy and offended Canadians. Shall we ask for apologies from them too?
First of all, I do want to correct. I said Fleetwood Kills. It's Fleetwood Port Kills. I do apologize. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I think that can be answered quite simply. There is one Prime Minister in this country's history that has been found guilty of the Conflict of Interest Act, and I can assure you that is not a Conservative Prime Minister. It is that Liberal Prime Minister that sits across the way and self-aggrandizes each and every day and is eroding the trust that Canadians have within this place, and it is for shame that there has not been appropriate consequences accordingly.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Laurentides-les-Belles. Yes, I have a question for my colleague, given that we all want to help communities get by, and also given that he is a human being. When things are going well, we don't try to change things, and then when things are going badly, and that's when we take the bull by the horns and try to redo everything. And what is preventing us from not shedding light on conflicts of interest in the government, while also making changes to help our fellow citizens in the pandemic? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the question, and she's absolutely right. We should be dealing with both, and that's exactly what we're doing. And you know what would have been great? Had we been doing this for the last number of weeks. Had the concern that the Liberals, in typical Liberal fashion, they'll shut everything down, say that there's an emergency, and then because they've shut everything down at the last minute, they come up with some miraculous solution and then have to ram it through with no regard for the process, no regard for constructive feedback that could be given. They just ram it through. They manufacture these circumstances so that they can use urgency for their own political ends. Well, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, Canadians deserve better. And we are seized in this place today with a number of very important issues, including help that Canadians need, but also the fact that we need to stop the erosion of trust that is taking place within our institutions of Parliament, and that's what this motion is about.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
You know, for the last couple of hours, we've now watched Liberals and Conservatives point fingers at each other. And before I sound like Mercutio and call for a pox on both their houses, let me just say this. I believe that the member should be careful, for those who live in glass houses should not be the ones to throw stones. And he did evade the question from my Liberal colleague previously. This motion does not have anything to do with the Prime Minister. It has to do with a former Liberal MP. So on that vein, would my honourable colleague submit to accepting this motion to be expanded to look into former Conservative MPs Dean Del Mastro or Rob Anders if he's found guilty of evading taxes?
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
So thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And every member of this House is subject to the Conflict of Interest Act, and every member of this House should be expected to be held to those high standards. So absolutely any violation needs to be held to the same standards so that we can do exactly what I referred to in my speech. Repair the erosion of trust that's taken place within the institution of Parliament, to ensure that Canadians can in fact trust their members, the members of Parliament from coast to coast to coast, to do what is best and act in a way that Canadians expect us to.